Let's talk Tanya for the 24th of Tishrei. Today we begin a new letter, a new chapter in Igeres HaKodesh, chapter 24. It's a somewhat famous letter. It's on the topic of talking during davening. As we explained before we started the previous letter, the previous chapter, with the inception of Chassidus, also was born the concept of Chassidic communities and Chassidic shuls. And the Alter Rebbe addressed quite a few letters to these new Chassidic communities, instructing them as to proper protocol and the way that a Chassidic shul should operate. So in the last letter the Alter Rebbe spoke about the problem of people coming to shul and they're speaking before davening and after davening, and very specifically, the Alter Rebbe was bothered by what was happening in the shuls between Mincha and Ma'ariv. In this letter, the Alter Rebbe tackles head-on the topic of talking during davening. Some of us might think that talking during davening is a somewhat recent phenomenon, but obviously there's something that's been going on for a long time. The Alter Rebbe himself finds the need to address this. And the Alter Rebbe says it's really not very complicated. It's quite simple. Davening is the time when Hashem comes to shul. Just like we come to shul, Hashem comes to shul, and He makes Himself available to us. He's waiting to hear from us. He's waiting to hear our supplications, our prayers. He wants to hear what we have to tell Him. And for us to stand and to talk during davening is supremely disrespectful. Alter Rebbe gives an example of a king who appears before his subjects. And imagine if when the king appears before his subjects, the two people are just having a conversation, just how disrespectful is that for the king? And Alter Rebbe says, very simply, even if you don't feel the respect, you don't feel the reverence for Hashem, pretend that you do. Because to do otherwise, besides for the fact that you're showing that you are spiritually completely insensitive, it's actually disrespectful for Hashem. It's disrespectful for the king that He's here and people are just having a conversation. We know that davening has many different halachas. If you look in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, there are many different laws that govern the davening. The way we're supposed to dress and how we're supposed to stand, the personal hygiene, and you're supposed to wash your hands beforehand. And the Alter Rebbe says, think about it. If a person truly feels that he or she is standing in Hashem's presence and gets it and has that reverence, they don't need any of these laws. They're obvious. Of course you have to stand with respect. Of course you can't talk. Of course you have to be dressed appropriately. So who are these laws addressed to? The Alter Rebbe says it's addressed to the many people who don't have that feeling. And nevertheless, we're supposed to fake it. We're supposed to pretend. And that's why our sages tell us that when we're davening, we're supposed to be ki'ilu oimed lifnei hamelech. It's as if we're standing before the king. That's the feeling we're supposed to have. And the obvious question is, what do you mean as if we're standing before the king? We are standing before the king. The Alter Rebbe says yes, but what Allah is saying is, even if you don't feel it, act as if you do. And that obviously includes not speaking, because that is very disrespectful. When shouldn't we speak? The Alter Rebbe says, I'm laying down the law. In his words, Shav elachol nefesh. This is something which applies equally to everyone. There are no exceptions. There is no talking in shul from the very beginning of davening until the end of davening, until after the last Kaddish. So it's not about from Baruch She'amar till after the Amidah. It's not about this part of davening or that part of davening. The Alter Rebbe says, he lays down the law. There is no davening. Hashem is here. Hashem is listening. It's not respectful. If you do speak during davening, the Alter Rebbe says that's no small matter. Someone who intentionally carries on a conversation during davening is actually excommunicated by the heavenly courts, and that needs to be undone. And the way to undo that, the Alter Rebbe says, is sit on the floor and ask 3 people to undo the excommunication. And if one does so, then the excommunication is removed retroactively. Now, I know that, practically speaking, we go to shul, and in many shuls there is speaking during davening. And there are also many people who justify this behavior. And they say, well, it's because I'm calm, I'm relaxed, I'm at home in shul, Avos Yisrael, I'm talking to people to make them feel good, I'm being a social creature. Hashem surely understands. But from this letter, we can see clearly that the Alter Rebbe felt that none of these excuses or justifications actually hold water. There is no place in any shul, and especially a shul, a Chabad shul, which operates according to the way the Alter Rebbe laid out the rules for speaking during davening. These are all excuses that are manufactured by the Yetzer Hara. And if we have a proper appreciation for what's going on during davening, Hashem being there, the obvious outcome is that we don't talk during davening. With this, we've concluded this letter, chapter 24. Tomorrow we start chapter 25, a new letter. And in that letter, the Alter Rebbe comes to the defense of a passage which was somewhat controversial in those times, in a book that contain the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov.